In this video is a story about Ragnarok, the end of the gods and the destruction of their home, Asgard. But let's start from the very beginning. In the early days of the universe, Odin, a powerful god, had dwarves make a hammer called Mjolnir from the heart of a star using a special forge. This forge was so strong that its sparks spread across the universe and wiped out life on distant planets, even the dinosaurs on Earth. The hammer was meant to be the ultimate weapon for the gods, and it was eventually passed down to Thor, Asgard's strongest warrior. However, Thor's brother Loki became jealous and resentful of him. Loki always felt overshadowed by Thor, and this led him down a path of evil and trickery. This is not the mischievous Loki that fans of the movies may know. This Loki is full of anger and pure evil. He hated his brother and anyone who stood in the way of his ambitions. Using dark magic, Loki discovered an ancient forge belonging to the dwarves. So Loki enlisted the help of the fire demon Surtur to use the forge and power it with his magical flames instead of the sun's power. Eager to make Thor suffer, Surtur created a collection of powerful weapons for some of Thor's greatest enemies. And so, led by Loki, the villains attacked Asgard, killing some of Thor's allies and severely injuring his old love, Lady Sif. Despite the surprise attack, Thor bravely confronted the villains. He wielded Mjolnir and clashed with the weapons of Ulek, a troll, and Loki's son Fenrir. The clash caused a massive explosion, creating a huge crater in the ground. As the dust settled, Thor realized that his once indestructible weapon was shattered. Before Thor could recover, Loki used his magic to blast Thor and destroy the land around him, sending him sinking into the sea. As Thor began to lose consciousness and was attacked by a giant serpent called the Midgard Serpent, he used the last of his hammer's magic to transport himself to his allies, the Avengers, in New York City. Before these events, Thor had become the ruler of Asgard after his father Odin died in battle against Hela. When Odin passed away, Thor inherited his incredible power called the Odin Force. This mystical power grants the wielder unimaginable magic, strength, and knowledge. One of the abilities granted by this power is the control over time. Thor's subsequent rule of Asgard had been disastrous, so Thor used the Odin Force to travel back in time and share his memories and mistakes with his younger self. This act meant sacrificing the son he had in the alternate future. Upon returning to the early days of his rule, Thor lost the Odin Force and had only his regular abilities. Loki took advantage of this situation and attacked Asgard. However, with the support of Captain America and Iron Man, Thor regained his confidence. Together with the Avengers, Thor fought against Ulek the Troll and defeated Fenrir and the giants who threatened Asgard. During the battle, they discovered a young survivor whom Thor took in as his apprentice. Using the enhanced weapons they acquired from their enemies, the Avengers helped forge a new hammer for Thor to channel his energies. Afterwards, Thor sent his human allies away and rallied the remaining people of Asgard for a perpetual battle against their attackers. Already, Thor was filling in his role as a potentially great leader and correcting his bad rap from the alternate past. As the battle intensifies, Thor becomes exhausted and injured. Just when things seem bleak, Thor's alien ally, Beta Ray Bill, arrives with his own hammer called Stormbreaker. Bill had proven himself worthy of wielding Thor's hammer in the past. His arrival brings a glimmer of hope in the midst of the growing darkness. Thor reluctantly allows Bill to join the fight, concerned for the safety of his mortal friends. This fear increases when Thor discovers that the young boy he had taken in died in the battle. As Thor mourns, he realizes that raw strength alone won't be enough to defeat Loki. He decides to seek the wisdom of Odin, believing it to be his father's greatest strength. To do this, Thor retraces Odin's steps, hoping to find guidance. He questions whether Asgard's destruction and his failure were inevitable. As he despairs, the Odin Force appears to Thor in the form of the young boy who died. The Odin Force is not just a power, it has a mind of its own. It explains to Thor that his time as a mortal, known as Donald Blake, set him apart from the other gods and gave him a unique perspective. The Odin Force reveals that Odin banished Thor to Earth as Donald Blake to teach him humility. Thor lived as a mortal without his memories of being a god for a decade. When he rediscovered Mjolnir, he regained his godhood. However, to regain the Odin Force, Thor must learn through sacrifice and understanding, less the privilege of inheritance. Thor learns that in order to gain wisdom, Odin sacrificed his eye and hung from the Tree of Life for 9 days and nights. Odin had to go through a ritual of death and sacrifice to transcend himself. Inspired by this, Thor attempts to follow in his father's footsteps by sacrificing one of his own eyes. However, he realizes that simply copying Odin's actions doesn't grant him the wisdom he seeks. The Odin force tells him that he must find his own path and face his own fate. Thor is told he must now acquire the magical runes, and in order to achieve this he must die. The runes will open his inner eyes even though he is now technically blind. After his so-called death, Thor finds himself in the realm of Hela, the goddess of death. But he is saved by the embodiment of the Odin force, who declares an end to Hela's time. Carried by Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, Thor arrives in a black void and sees the ancient gods known as those who sit above in shadow. Despite missing his eyes, his magical sight allows him to see through their illusions. Thor confronts these ancient deities and challenges their authority. They belittle him, but Thor reveals their secret, which is, they feed on the suffering and death of gods. Those who sit above laugh, thinking Thor is powerless against them. But Thor surprises them, claiming he has become something they never foresaw. He reminds them that Odin found a way to hide Thor from their sight and that they know nothing of mortals and their potential. So in a burst of energy, Thor teleports himself back to Asgard, ready to face whatever comes next. With the knowledge of the runes, a god could see the future and cast powerful spells. After hanging from the Tree of Life, Thor gained wisdom from the Well of Ymir and discovered the ancient runes. This newfound knowledge gave him the ability to see the past, control the present, and shape the future. It made him an all-knowing deity, capable of understanding the connections between living creatures and the world. The runes allowed Thor to see beyond reality itself and perceive those who manipulated fate, playing with the lives of the gods. Combined with his experiences as a mortal and his refusal to accept fate, Thor has rightfully become a unique and unpredictable being. He doesn't conform to the old rules of godhood anymore. And although he would go on to possess these abilities for a short time, his strength had become immense, as he effortlessly defeated old enemies and dealt with Loki as well as those who sit above. Upon returning to Asgard, Thor was immediately attacked by Mangog, an incredibly powerful monster fueled by hatred against the gods. In a remarkable display of power, the new Rune King Thor defeated Mangog effortlessly with a mere wave of his hand. When confronted by Loki, Thor's magic sight had already revealed everything about his brother and his army. Trolls summoned by Loki were easily dispatched as Thor's aura protected him. Thor then proceeded to punish Loki for the lives he had taken. Thor removed Loki's head from his body, which was an act that shocked and humiliated his brother. This also illustrated the extent of Thor's reality-altering abilities, rendering him virtually untouchable as if he could rewrite the rules of existence. The Odin force now observed Thor's actions with amazement and excitement. Just as well, Thor planned to bring about the final Ragnarok, which would end the constant cycle of death and rebirth for the gods of Asgard. With the Odin force and the wisdom of the runes, Thor aimed to defeat those who sit above by putting an end to their existence forever. Now, it was time for Thor to make his final move. He was determined to end Asgard's suffering once and for all. Thor sought out his formidable foe, the demon Surtur, who was busy forging his ancient weapons. Thor proposed a deal. If Surtur helped him to have Mjolnir, his hammer, reforged, then in return, Surtur would have a path to Asgard to wage war against the kingdom. Loki was horrified by this plan, as he believed he was supposed to be the evil one, not Thor. But Thor was thinking ahead. It would be the ultimate battle, one that would never be repeated. Surtur agreed to the deal, but with a condition: he wanted to kill as many as he could. And so, the hammer was remade, and Surtur marched upon Asgard. The remaining gods joined forces to fight him. As the war raged on, Thor approached the Fates, who wove the tapestry of destiny with magical threads. They warned Thor that he couldn't undo what was already woven. The tapestry had been created, but Thor saw that the threads fed back into themselves, forming an endless cycle. And despite Loki's protests, Thor raised Mjolnir, ready to split the thread and end the cycle once and for all. However, just as Thor was about to strike, those who sit above appeared and halted him mid-swing. They congratulated him on his accomplishments and offered him a place by their side. They saw him as a threat to their power, having surpassed near godhood and become something even greater. They tempted him with the idea of ascending to a god of gods. But Thor had already ascended beyond them. He saw through their game and now acknowledged that their apology was too late. He intended to punish them and make them face the consequences of their actions for the first time. Thor destroyed the thread, shattering the pantheon. The tree of life folded into itself and ceased to exist from that time onwards.